Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. A lot of times I buy these things because I use them in my research and classes and things like that. But I think that was a lot. I mean, I would love to be called a Coca-Cola Muslim. That'd be great. Muslims get called worse things today. On the way up here, yes. First, I'll start with this. On the way up here, I was reading in the train, and I saw this article about Lena Dunham. Do you know who that is? Nobody knows who that is? Okay. Though it's a guy who said that. That's interesting. So she's a writer, director. She writes this show and The Girls on HBO, which I don't watch, to be very clear. But it's super kind of supposedly tells the paradigmatic story of Brooklyn hipsters, and so she's obviously very with it and hip, and she's also committed feminist. But anyway, so this article was saying how she was in trouble because one of her actress on the show had accused one of the writers on the show of sexually assaulting her when she was 17 years old. So this was like, I don't know, some years back. And then Lena Dunham defended the writer against his accusation. And then the writer of this article that I was reading said, this is bad because Lena Dunham is supposedly a feminist, and feminists are supposed to always believe the victim. And she was not believing the victim, but defending the accused man. So I thought this was very interesting. And you'll see why I bring this up. But I wanted to just start with that because it was on my mind. But the title of the lecture is Leaving Your Mark as Muslims. And I was thinking about this the other day because, the world seems very crazy. So I was saying this the other day. One of the problems with being, so I just turned 40 a few months ago. So one of the problems with being 40 is, so I was young enough, I didn't have a cell phone until I was in senior year of college, and I used to drive long distances with a map. You have to find how to get someplace on a map and have the map with you, and if you wanted to meet your friends, you'd have to go and set a preset time and meet them at a certain place. If they didn't show up or you missed each other, it was pretty much you're out of luck, right? So I'm old enough to talk about that time, but I don't feel old enough yet to say that I can really tell you if things have changed a lot. Are we really in a crazy time, or is this just the most recent crazy time since the 1970s that I don't remember, or something like that? Because you go back, so with these people here, I guess I'm nodding, we're in a crazy time. So they appear to be older than me. But of course, very stressful, and it's very depressing, I think, if you're a Muslim. You look domestically every day, there's someone on television, or maybe even the president of the United States saying how your religion is bad and extreme, and how Muslims have problems and Muslims need to reform and Muslims are a threat, and this Islamophobia is just out of control. Of course, as I was saying at lunch, I don't ever get treated like that because I don't look like what people think Muslims should look like. So I basically get up here and talk about all this stuff, and then I don't really pay any prices. So I guess I'm just whatever, slightly fraudulent, or I guess you could say it that way. But I mean, but I do my best. So that's really depressing. And then you look at overseas, and you see what's happening in the Muslim world, and it's just really depressing, because you have, on the one hand, you have kind of the extremist violence of ISIS, and all sorts of horrible acts of violence and done in the name of our religion, in the name of our Prophet, and that causes huge problems for Muslims here. It causes huge problems for Muslims overseas. It causes people to doubt their religion, lose their faith. And on the other hand, there's that extreme, and then you have the extreme kind of UAE, now Saudi, Egyptian agenda of anything that is not just utter obsequious subordination to the regime is terrorism, right? So if you're a Muslim who does anything other than literally put aside every bit of dignity and integrity you have to lick the boots of the government of that country. If you do anything besides that, you're an Islamist and you're a terrorist. And you should be arrested, you should be put in prison, you should be tortured. So these two options are really horrendous. This is so depressing. But despite that really depressing state of affairs, both domestically and foreign policy, I'm very optimistic about Muslims in the United States. I'm very about Muslims' role in the United States, about Muslim life in the United States. And I'll tell you why I'm optimistic. One reason is that, there's this hadith, I think it's in al-Madinata kal-Kur, right? And this reminds me of another phrase in the Bible, in the Old Testament, talks about the refiner's fire, the refiner's fire. So Kur is like a refiner's fire. And what it does is it's what melts the dross, the impurities out of metal and leaves you with the pure alloy. These times for Muslims are hard in America, but people who hold on to their faith are going to be that much stronger. There's going to be a lot of Muslims who fall off the wagon, so to speak. Who can't who can't hold on to their faith, who are too bombarded by negativity, by abuse, and by doubt. But the people who hold on to their faith, they will be that much stronger and that much more established in this country. So that's one reason I'm optimistic. And the other reason is that Muslims have offer the solution to a lot of the problems this country has. Now, Muslims are maybe 1% of the population here, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a big impact. We can't really have a positive impact that will both better the people around us, but also show other people and show the society as a whole what we have to offer in our religion. Okay, so why are Muslims the solution here? Because, in one sense, because of the incredible polarization in this society. I mean, polarization is political. You see it in Congress. You see it between the Democrats, Republicans. But you even more so see it in society. An incredible polarization between, quote-unquote liberals, quote-unquote conservatives. We generally know what these terms mean. These two visions of what the country should be, what the country is at its core, are completely incompatible. I mean, and it's almost unimaginable for these two kind of typical, let's say, paradigmatic liberal and conservative to actually sit down and have anything in common except for, I don't know, rooting for some sports team or something like that. I don't watch sports, so I have no idea what even sports are being played right now. But on the one hand, you have liberals, right, who have this vision of diversity, a diverse society, tolerant society, but a lot of liberals in the United States can't actually accept conservatism as one of those tolerated groups. So this is what it's often called intolerant tolerance. So it's tolerance, but only tolerance for those people who accept and embrace all others, not tolerant for those people who don't agree with other people, who aren't trying to take away their rights, but who simply don't approve of other people. And we've all experienced this, I think. It's not good enough for a lot of liberal settings. It's not good enough for you just to say, I'm okay, you have a right to do that, I'm not. You have to actually approve of people's lifestyles. You have to approve of the way they live. They want your moral approval. They want you to accept this as part of your religion. And we see this a lot with, generally it's called progressive Muslims. They're not, like Muslims commit sins all the time. That's not a big deal. Islamic civilization is full of Muslims doing all sorts of stuff. But this group wants these certain activities to be considered halal and legitimate in our religion. And until they get that acceptance, that moral acceptance, they're not going to leave other Muslims alone. They crave that acceptance. So this is intolerant tolerance. It's liberalism, but it's tolerance, but it can't actually accept conservatives amongst that number of that kind of plan. So yeah, I remember. So I asked this feminist Facebook group. I said, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. I suspect that this phrase, always believe the victim, women don't lie about sexual. I suspect this is not a factual statement. This is a rhetorical statement, right? So if I say, we need to help we need to help homeless people. Homeless people want our help. Now, maybe some homeless people don't want our help. They say, I don't want your help, I'm happy. But in general, they want our help, right? So when you say stuff like that, you're making a generalization, but you're making a generalization to get across a message that has not been received well. So when the phrase, always believe the victim, or women don't lie about sexual assault, doesn't mean literally of human beings, half of all human beings, namely women, are incapable, somehow biologically incapable of lying about this subject. No, that's not what it means. What it means is, if a woman says that sexual assault occurred, don't say, oh, you're just saying this, or you're just crying rape, or something like that. No, this happens, but it's very rare. Depending on the different studies, it's either 2% or 8 to 10% of accusations of sexual assault turn out to be false. It also depends on what you mean by false. False can mean didn't happen, or it can mean didn't happen like it was described, or it did happen as described, but that's not actually a crime. So it really depends how you define these things. That's why I think the numbers are so divergent. But the point is, your reaction shouldn't be, I don't believe you, you're lying. Your reaction should be, chances are this person is telling the truth. Okay, that's fine. Although it is pretty ironic that just yesterday I got this email from a person, a woman, saying, Sheikh so-and-so sexually assaulted me. It's a long email. I was like, oh boy, oh no. What am I going to do? So I read the email, go down the email, and then it says, and then he had his jinn assault me. I was like, okay. Yeah, so, I mean, that's not the first time I've had this. I've actually gotten multiple emails like this with the jinn. But if that sentence hadn't been included, then it would have been, for all intents and purposes, an entirely true message. And then if you follow that principle of always believe the accuser, I would have had to believe that this sheikh had done something, when in fact, unless he actually did have his jinn do this, he's innocent. I'm going to go with he didn't have the jinn do that, and that he's innocent. So, and that, like I said, that's not the first time I've gotten an email like that. So, what I found interesting about this Lena Dunham article, and you see this a lot in the media, is that this phrase, women don't lie about sexual assault, is not treated as a slogan. It's treated as an actual legal process. It's treated as if you have to believe this and act on it, or else you're a bad person. And Lena Dunham, of course, didn't, because she knew this writer and she wanted to defend him. And I think most people, I would guess, even if they said, believe the victim, if their own father or their own husband or their own brother was accused of something, their first instinct probably would be to defend them, or at least to say, let's have some kind of investigation. At least let him, hear his side of the story. But what's unfortunate is that this phrase is actually treated like a real legal rule now. So that, in fact, people will expect you to condemn people who are accused, even though that person has never had any right to respond, or there hasn't been any burden of proof on the accuser to prove their accusation. And both in Islam and in American law, the burden of proof is on the accuser. And this isn't just a rule in court. This is a rule in society. So if I write on social media, so-and-so did something terrible to me, everyone would, I think it would be expected from perspective of Muslims, I would be expected to present evidence for that. Otherwise, this person could accuse me of slander, justifiably accuse me of slander. So we have this in the hadith of the Prophet, al-bayyin al-mudda'i wal-yamin ala man ankar, right? The person who makes the accusation has to provide some kind of direct evidence. Usually that's 2 witnesses or 1 witness and the oath of that person making the accusation. And if the accuser doesn't have this evidence, then the accused just has to swear an oath that they're innocent. They don't have to prove they're innocent. The burden of proof is on the accuser to prove their case or their accusation. Now, people say, well, this is not a court, this is society. Okay, that's true. But we also have other rules in our tradition that tell us how to deal with these things. إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِالنَّبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. If a sinful person, a person of bad character, comes to you with some kind of news or accusation, you have to clarify, tabayyanu. And it's interesting, that's the majority reading is tabayyanu, but Al-Kisa'i and Hamza, two of the seven transmitters of Quranic readings, they have tathabbatu. Tathabbatu means, substantiate. Tabayyanu means clarify, tathabbatu means substantiate. So in these two readings, you have one, seek to understand, and you also seek to substantiate the accusation. So what's important here is that it really depends on who the accuser is. So in the case, like, for example, of Harvey Weinstein, you see all sorts of very known people are coming forward and saying, this guy did this to me. People who, they go out there, they put their reputation on the line, they're a public person, they know they could be sued for this, and they're sometimes very respected actresses or actors. And so that's very different than somebody who is, let's say, a known Islamophobe or a liar or someone who's been shown to be false in their accusations before. That's very different. That person's accusation is not treated the same as people who are citizens in good standing. In addition, you can't act on anonymous accusations. So in the case of some of the instances that have happened recently in the Muslim community, some of the accusers are anonymous. And that's not fair to the accused because it could be the same, I could write one email from my account, say, so-and-so did something to me, then go and start two more email accounts, go to the public library, go to the Starbucks, send those emails, and now there's three accusers. So one of the major principles in Islamic, what? Did you hear something? Anyway, I can't remember. In hadith transmission, if you don't know the identity of the hadith transmitter, it's automatically unreliable. If a transmitter is anonymous or unidentified, automatically unreliable transmission because you can't check on someone's story if you don't know who they are. So it is very important to point out, right? I'm not saying that in Islam, if somebody doesn't have, so sometimes there's a mistake, which is people think, you need to have 4 witnesses of something, or else it's qadhaf, or else you're doing slander. That's not true. Okay? Somebody saying, so-and-so has bad character, so-and-so is inappropriate with the opposite sex, that's not qadhaf. You don't need 4 witnesses for that. That's just giving people information. And in fact, one of the situations in which it's agreed upon in Islamic law, one of the situations in which you are allowed to say something bad about someone behind their back is to warn other people. So if someone asks you, hey, I'm thinking of hiring so-and-so to be my babysitter, and you know that person is untrustworthy, you have to say, and you're allowed to say, no, the person's not trustworthy. So we're allowed to warn people about other people. We're allowed to heed those warnings. We don't have to turn off our brain and pretend like we're not hearing stuff. But there's a very big difference, there's a huge difference between passing that kind of information discreetly to people who ask for it, who have a need to know, and getting on social media and blasting it, right? Or then saying, if you don't believe the accuser, you're a bad person. Because when you say that, that means the accused person is guilty. So people forget there's a difference between our private interactions, and our public and semi-public statements. Now, and I wrote an article about this. It's very clear that in an American judicial system and in American society and in American institutions, women have not gotten a fair shake. right? Women who've come forward and said, I've been abused, I've been treated badly, they're not treated, their complaints are not heeded, they're not given their due process. This has been consistently demonstrated. But that doesn't mean that you allow this pendulum to swing the opposite direction and ignore the rights of people to have the presumption of innocence, which is, as I said, important in American law and absolutely essential in Islam. So if someone comes out and makes an accusation, in my opinion, the obligation of Muslims is to take the accusation seriously, to say, look, this is a serious accusation, and there needs to be an appropriate, fair, qualified body of people, some kind of committee, who's going to investigate this to find out if it's true or not. Not people who are biased, not people who are all men, not people who are all women, not people who are all one thing or the other thing, but a fair representative body who will be able to look at all the information that we don't have as regular Joe or Ahmeds and Saras. And then we should say, justice needs to be done. So we shouldn't say, don't say this, this is slander, you need 4 witnesses. That's ignorance. We should say, if there's an accusation, the people who are qualified need to look into it to determine if they're true or not. But just getting online and doing this one thing or the other, deny this, believe that, this is just specutainment. This is not helping anybody. You're not comforting anybody. You're not helping, defending anybody, right? We need to remember that if you're a Muslim, the accused is innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof is on the accuser. That doesn't mean they have to have 4 witnesses for everything they say, right? It just means that people who are qualified need to be put into a position of evaluating what the truth is. And that almost always is not just some guy sitting on Facebook like me, okay? People who actually know about the situation. So how does that have to do with the original topic of my presentation? Honestly, well, it actually has a lot to do with it, which is that it's very hard in this environment to have a position that's moderate, right? Either you have to be super woke, which I'm definitely not going to get accused of being, right? Super woke, or you have to be, alt-right. These are the 2 flags that you have to stand by, and everyone's going to cheer you if you're by one of these flags. If you're in the middle, you're going to get a lot of grief. But Muslims are in the middle. We are ummatan wasata. We acknowledge the rights of the accused, and we acknowledge the importance of due process. And the due process isn't just some clumsy monocle. It's a multi-lens thing for which there are lots of different tools, in which our community has to have different institutions, different kind of tribunals to deal with. So we can provide an example for how our society should deal with these kind of accusations and these sort of issues that we've seen so prominently in the media in recent days. Jazakumullahu khair.